Hello, we're going to talk about critical thinking, and we'll start with Bloom's taxonomy. There will be a couple of questions about Bloom's taxonomy on the final. And so usually you'll see Bloom's taxonomy represented as a pyramid like you see here. You'll see it represented in other ways. It really just refers to the 6 types of thinking skills ranked in order of complexity. Knowledge, remembering and recalling at the bottom, comprehension or understanding, application, applying, analysis, analyzing, synthesis, and evaluating and creating. So those actually over here are listed in reverse. Evaluating, and then the highest order of thinking is creating. Okay, so this begins as a child, as early as toddler age. You start to develop and utilize the first level order of thinking in Bloom's taxonomy, which is remembering. So you're basically retrieving or repeating information or ideas from memory. This is the first step and first and most basic thinking skill you develop, starting as a toddler with learning colors, numbers, and letters. The skill set verbs associated with remembering, so these are, if you're doing any of these things, these verbs, you know that you are using the remembering type of thinking. Bookmarking, counting, describing, drawing, enumerating, finding, Googling, identifying, labeling, listing, matching, naming, quoting, recalling, reciting, searching, selecting, sequencing, telling, and writing. These are all examples of remembering and recalling, the first level in Bloom's taxonomy, which makes sense. You have to remember it in order to tell it to someone else. And so you have some examples here of things that you will start to memorize early on as a toddler. The numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they have representative colors that you may be memorizing. I have a picture down here of the anatomy of the skull. So, I mean, you're still using, even though it's the first and least complex type of thinking, you use it all the time. You just get better at it. The next level is understanding. This is developed in early education, so kinder, early K through 12. You're interpreting or constructing meaning, inferring or explaining material from written, spoken, or graphic sources. Reading is the most common understanding skill, and these skills are developed starting with early education. And so there's an example here of a person reading a book and they're highlighting and making notations. So they are engaged in the type of thought of understanding. Some skill set verbs associated with this type of thinking: blogging, concluding, describing, discussing, explaining, generalizing, identifying, illustrating, interpreting, paraphrasing, predicting, reporting, restating, reviewing, summarizing, telling, tweeting, and we saw tell as a verb associated with remembering and recalling as well. So you'll see some of these verbs show up as being associated with more than one type of thought. And we're just, with understanding, it's a little bit different. I mean, you might say that restating could be like a synonym of telling, but you have to show that you're not just memorizing something by rote, if you're going to restate something or paraphrase, because you're now showing understanding by translating it into your own words. Okay. The next level is applying. The third level of Bloom's taxonomy is applying. We start to learn this in middle school. So we're using learned material or implementing material in new situations. This skill is commonly used starting in middle school and in some cases earlier. So there are skill set verbs associated with this level of thinking: applying, obviously, articulating, changing, charting, choosing, collecting, computing, controlling, demonstrating, determining, doing, downloading, dramatizing, imitating, implementing, interviewing, installing, and there they're referring to software, so on and so forth. So you're taking knowledge that you have and you're now applying it. You're not just memorizing it by rote, you're not just understanding it, but you're actually applying it in the world. Okay. The next level is analyzing. So this is something we start to do, well, you will see it developed in college. So you're breaking material down or concepts into key elements and determining how the parts relate to one another or to an overall structure or purpose. So your English instructors, for example, ask you to do this quite a bit, especially in English 102 or 103, where you're taking a story or a piece of literature or a piece of research material and analyzing the contents and reporting back on it. These are mental actions included in this. Mental actions included in this skill are examining, contrasting, or differentiating, separating, categorizing, experimenting, and deducing. You most likely started developing this skill in high school, particularly in science courses. So remember those labs that you did in science, experiments. That would be an example, and you will continue and have continued to practice this in college. And some examples of verbs that are associated with analyzing: analyze, obviously, break down, characterize, classify, compare, contrast. I'm sure you've been asked to do this if you're doing public speech or you're writing research papers, debating, deducing, differentiating, outlining, separating, subdividing, examining are all verbs associated with the analyzing type of thinking. And we have a picture here comparing apples and oranges. There's lots of different ways that you could do that. You could compare the color, the texture, the taste, the smell. This would be an example of analyzing. You could break it down by nutritional value, so on and so forth. Okay, the next level of Bloom's taxonomy is evaluating. Second to the highest or most complex level of thinking. We develop this in college, career, life in general. This is described as assessing, making judgments, and drawing conclusions from ideas, information, or data. Critiquing the value and usefulness of material. This skill encompasses most of what is commonly referred to as critical thinking, and this skill will be called on frequently during your college years and beyond. And critical thinking is the first focus of this chapter in particular, this week's module. Some skill set verbs associated with evaluating would be appraising, arguing, assessing, beta testing, collaborating. Again, you see compare, contrast here. Concluding, critiquing, criticizing, evaluating, judging, network. He even says friend, defriend. So, yeah, I guess that would be an example of evaluating. I want to be friends with you. I don't want to be friends with you based on whatever characteristics or actions that you associate with the person. So that would be an example of evaluating. And the most complex level of thinking in Bloom's taxonomy is creating, and this is developed in college, career, and life. And it's described as putting parts together or reorganizing them in a new way, form, or product. This process is the most difficult mental function, and this skill will make you stand out in college and is in very high demand in the workforce. Creative thinking, for example, is the second focus of this chapter. Some verbs that are associated with this skill set: adapt, animate, blog, combine, compose, construct, create, design, develop, devise, film, formulate, invent, podcast, organize, remix, revise, rewrite, restructure. These are all verbs that are associated with creating. So I created something today. I made a necklace out of a carving and turned it into a adjustable necklace. So, I mean, it's a simple example, but technically you're taking two parts and now making it into something new. And all right, we've gotten through Bloom's taxonomy in under 15 minutes, right before Screencast-O-Matic cuts me off. So you do see some pictures here. I really like these upcycled planters. Great example of creative or creating. They've even taken an old VW bug and made it into a actually pretty lovely planter. Same with these old tires. They've painted the old tires and turned them into planters, and you have some other examples here, which is very creative and ingenious, and a fun example of creating the sixth and most complex level of thinking in Bloom's taxonomy. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.